I am 78 years old, and for the last 15 years, I have lived with an unwanted companion, pain. It began in my knees, then moved to my shoulders, and finally settled in my hands. Every movement became a small punishment. Getting out of bed in the mornings was a silent torture. Sometimes, just opening a jar or taking a short walk was enough to remind me that I was no longer the same as before. Like many, I followed the path everyone does. Doctors, prescriptions, pharmacies, pills for the pain, creams with long names promising quick relief, injections that gave some result, for a while. But each solution brought new side effects. Stomach aches, high blood pressure, insomnia. I began to feel like I was fixing one thing, but damaging three more. There came a point when I resigned myself. I thought, this is part of aging. It's just how it is. You have to endure it. And then, when I was no longer looking for answers, I found one. No doctor told me. It didn't come on TV, nor was it prescribed at the pharmacy. I discovered it by accident, in a simple conversation, in an unexpected place. A natural oil. One I didn't know about, but that transformed my daily life. It gave me back mobility, reduced inflammation, and most importantly, restored my hope. Today, I want to tell you everything. Because if you are going through something similar, if you feel like your body is betraying you and no one listens, this could make a difference. It's not magic, it's not a miracle cure, but it is something real that exists and that can help you more than you imagine. Before continuing, I'd like to ask you a question. How old are you, and from which country are you watching me? Leave it in the comments. I'd love to know where you are hearing this story from. Because if there's one thing I've learned over these years, it's that sharing what works can be the greatest act of care we can do for others. Chaik. Joint pain doesn't appear suddenly. It comes slowly, disguised as stiffness, a small crack when you stand up from a chair, or a slight discomfort when climbing stairs. At first, you think you're just tired, that it was the weather, that it will pass. But it doesn't pass. Over time, walking becomes slower. Steps get shorter, legs feel heavier. The body no longer responds like before. Sleeping is no longer rest, because it hurts to lie on your side, back, or even your stomach. You wake up several times at night because your knees burn, your shoulders throb, or you simply feel like your joints are full of stones. I remember one morning in particular. I got up, placed my feet on the floor, and felt such a sharp sting in my hip that I had to sit down again. Just that made me start the day already tired. There is no energy when the first thing you feel upon opening your eyes is pain. And the worst is not the physical pain. It is the feeling of losing your freedom. Not being able to walk to the store, needing help to put on your socks, avoiding going out with friends because you know you won't be able to sit long or walk far. That is what hurts the most. Realizing your world gets smaller every day because your body no longer lets you do what was once normal. Many told me, that's normal at your age. They repeated it like a mantra, as if aging necessarily meant living with pain. And the saddest part is many people accept it. They give up. They learn to live with that constant discomfort, like someone who learns to live with an annoying noise in the house. They endure it because they believe there is no other option. But that's not fair. It shouldn't be like that. We don't have to accept a limited life just because we get older. I spent more than a decade feeling like I had no alternatives, that everything had already been said, that pain was my destiny. I locked myself in that idea until I understood that the body, even as it ages, still has the ability to recover if you give it the right things. And in my case, that change began with something as simple as an oil. But before I get there, I need you to understand this. You are not alone in your pain, and above all, you are not condemned to live with it forever. After 60 or 70 years of age, these types of joint discomforts become extremely common. There is hardly anyone without a knee, hip, or shoulder complaining every day. But just because it is common doesn't mean it's normal or inevitable. If you too feel your body starting to fail, if walking or sleeping as before has become hard, stay with me. because there is more than one way to live this stage of life, and I'm going to prove it to you. When pain became part of my daily life, I didn't hesitate to do what everyone does: go to the doctor. The first thing they gave me was a prescription, then another, and another. Pills in the morning, in the afternoon, for when the pain was bad, for when it was mild. Sometimes anti-inflammatories, other times stronger analgesics. And when my body got used to them, and they stopped working, they changed the brand, or increased the dose. For years I lived like that, like an experiment with legs. I also tried creams, gels, hot patches, menthol massages, and even saltwater baths. Some things relieved a bit, others did nothing, and others simply numbed the pain, but never removed it. It was like covering a crack with tape. I remember once a doctor prescribed me a very strong anti-inflammatory. He said, "This will help you, but only for a few days." I took it for 2 weeks because I felt it helped. Then I started getting heartburn. Later, stomach pain. And finally, I ended up with an ulcer that left me bedridden for almost a month. To get rid of one pain, I ended up with a worse one. And it wasn't just my stomach. Over the years, my blood pressure began to rise for no apparent reason. They did tests, studies, and everything seemed normal. Until another doctor, much more honest, told me, "Those pain medications you use also raise your blood pressure. That's simple. That's serious." They also told me that my liver, having to process so many chemicals every day, was starting to suffer. I wouldn't notice it now, but over time it could bring more serious consequences. That's when I felt trapped in a vicious circle. Take something for pain, which forced me to take something else for my stomach, which forced me to control my blood pressure, which forced me to live in fear. And that's when I understood clearly. I felt I was hurting myself more than helping. That phrase stuck with me, because it wasn't just my body paying the price, it was my quality of life, my peace of mind, my confidence. I became distrustful of anything that came in a box. I didn't want more remedies that made me dependent. I wanted something that wouldn't shut down other parts of my body while calming one. That's when I started to ask myself, is there something else? Something natural, without side effects, that really works? That was the beginning of a search I didn't expect to make at that age. A search that led me to discover an alternative not sold in shiny boxes, nor advertised on TV, but with a power I didn't expect. And the most incredible part is that it was always within reach. Nobody just told me about it. Tag. It was an ordinary afternoon, nothing special. I was sitting on a park bench, soaking up some sun while trying to stretch my legs. My left knee hurt, as almost every day, but that day it was especially uncomfortable. The air was fresh, the trees swayed gently, yet I could only focus on the sharp pain I felt bending my leg. A woman sat beside me. Her name was Matilda. She was a little over 80, her hair white as salt, and she had an energy that contrasted with her age. She walked without a cane, with a firm step, and her face didn't carry that expression of suffering you learn to recognize in those who live with chronic pain. We started talking, like two strangers sharing the same bench and the same tiredness. I told her, almost without meaning to, that my knee hurt and no treatment was working. She listened attentively, without interrupting. When I finished, she looked at me calmly and said, "I went through that too. My hands were like stones. I couldn't even comb my hair, until I started using copaiba oil." I was silent. I didn't know if she was joking. Oil? Of what? Copaiba. I had never heard that word in my life. I asked her what it was, and she explained it was an oil extracted from an Amazonian tree, known for centuries for its anti-inflammatory properties. She said she used it daily, applied it directly to her joints, and in her case, also took it in drops diluted in water. I nodded, with that mix of skepticism and curiosity you have when you've tried everything without results. She told me it was very common in her village in Brazil, and that the elders had always used it, that it wasn't miraculous, but if you were consistent, it helped more than any pill had. I thanked her for the conversation and left, but the word kept spinning in my head. Copaiba. That night, I looked it up on my phone. I read about the tree, the oil, studies mentioning its natural anti-inflammatory effect. There were testimonies of people saying they felt relief, regained movement, reduced swelling. Still, I doubted. I had tried so many things, but at the same time I had nothing to lose by trying. I felt trapped, and any chance of improvement, no matter how small, deserved at least one opportunity. The next day I went to an herb shop downtown. I asked for copaiba oil. They had it. I bought a small bottle. It didn't cost as much as I thought. The seller explained how to use it and recommended starting with a small amount to see how my body reacted. I went home, sat quietly, and tried it. I applied it to my knee with a gentle massage. I didn't feel anything immediately. No heat, no tingling, no relief. Just the soft scent of the oil, a little woody, almost imperceptible. But that was the first time. The beginning of something that, although I didn't know it yet, would change how I lived with pain. Jag. First weeks of use. I remember well the day I received it. It was a small amber bottle with a simple label that read, copaiba oil. It didn't promise miracles. No bright colors or exaggerated slogans. Just an oil, pure and natural, which according to that woman, had been used for generations to relieve deep pain. The first night, I expected nothing. I put a few drops on my knees and ankles, massaging gently as she explained. Its aroma was mild, almost imperceptible. I went to bed without high hopes, thinking that if it didn't work, at least I wasn't losing much. But that night, I slept differently. I didn't wake up with the usual leg cramps or the need to change position every half hour. The next day, I felt more rested than usual. I didn't jump out of bed like I was young again, but I noticed something new. I wasn't afraid to put my feet on the floor. I kept applying it every night, on my hands, elbows, hips. I used very little, as recommended. After 3 days, the swelling in my fingers had gone down. I could button my shirt without struggling with the buttons. I walked to the store without stopping every 10 meters. These were small things, but when you live with constant pain, those little advances feel like giant victories. The following week, I decided to do something risky. I stopped taking my pain pills for a few days. I just wanted to know if what I felt was real or if I was being self-suggested. To my surprise, the pain didn't increase. In fact, I felt better. I had less stiffness in the mornings, less need to rest all the time. That's when I understood this was not a coincidence. It was real, not a placebo effect. My body was responding. I realized something else. For years, all I had done was silence the pain with medications. But this oil didn't silence it. It deflated it. It went to the root of the problem. And it did so without damaging my stomach, without causing insomnia, without the mental fog sometimes brought by strong painkillers. Every day I felt a bit more agile. I could carry light things without fear, climb stairs with less effort. I even swept the yard again, something I hadn't done in months. And then one morning, while putting on my socks without pain, a thought came that moved me to tears. For the first time in years, I felt my body was thanking me. It wasn't magic, it wasn't immediate, but it was consistent. And that consistency brought relief. And that relief, hope. At that moment, I knew I had to share it. Because what was giving me back quality of life didn't come from a lab, nor a medical prescription. It came from an ancient tree and a wise woman who decided to talk to me at just the right time. What is this oil, and why does it work? The oil that woman recommended to me, and which has since become an essential part of my life, is copaiba oil. And if you've never heard of it, I don't blame you. I hadn't either. Yet this oil, extracted from a tree in the Amazon rainforest, has properties that have even surprised those who have studied medicinal plants for years. Copaiba is a natural resin distilled to obtain an oil with a very special characteristic. It contains a high concentration of beta-caryophyllene, a compound with powerful anti-inflammatory effects. What does this mean simply? That it helps reduce inflammation from within, acting on the same receptors that regulate pain in our body. When I first heard this, I thought it sounded too good to be true. But then I researched. I read simple articles, testimonials, and even found scientific studies. One, published in a respected medical journal, showed that beta-caryophyllene acts directly on the CB2 receptors of the endocannabinoid system, the same ones that regulate inflammation and immune response. And the best part, it does so without affecting the central nervous system, so it does not cause addiction or mental alterations. In clearer words, this oil helps the body reduce joint inflammation naturally, without stressing the liver, without damaging the stomach, without serious side effects. Something that is hardly said about traditional medications. Have you ever been prescribed an anti-inflammatory and then given another medication to protect your stomach? Or warned not to take it for more than a certain number of days because it affects the kidneys or raises blood pressure? That happened to me all the time. I felt like remedies were a necessary evil, until I understood there are options that don't punish your body while helping. Also, studies have been done on older people with chronic pain and found that those who used copaiba oil for at least 4 weeks reported significant pain reduction and improved mobility without adverse effects. Of course, it's not a miracle product. It won't restore lost cartilage or cure advanced diseases overnight. But it can do something very important. Reduce the inflammation that causes pain, allowing the body to move better, sleep better, and recover more easily. And that, at our age, is no small thing. When you start having pain every day, any improvement counts. And if that improvement comes without damaging the rest of the body, then it's worth trying. What impressed me most about copaiba oil was not just how I felt, but also how gentle it is on the body. It can be used topically, rubbed on the skin, or even ingested in small doses, depending on the case. There are no complicated recipes, no harsh chemicals, no terrifying warnings on the label. In a world where everything seems to have a contraindication, finding something that simply helps is already rare. That's why I still use it today. Not because I believe in magic solutions, but because when something really works, it doesn't need embellishment. And best of all, my body thanks me, and that is proof enough for me. When I started using turmeric oil, I made many mistakes. I confess, I thought that just applying it once would bring miraculous changes, as if the body could get rid of years of inflammation in a couple of days. But it wasn't like that. The relief came, yes, but it came hand in hand with something many are unwilling to practice: consistency. These kinds of natural oils don't work like a pill you take, and that works in 20 minutes. They work differently, more deeply. They need time to act. It's like planting a seed. You don't see it grow the next day, but if you water it every day, it ends up blooming. The first thing I understood was how to use it correctly. In my case, I used cold-pressed turmeric oil. There are many ways to apply it, but I'll tell you how I did it and what worked for me. In the morning, after showering, I applied a few drops directly on the areas where I felt the most pain: knees, elbows, wrists. I did it with gentle circular motions, without pressing. The oil is dense and aromatic. When rubbed, it warms slightly and absorbs better. It took me about 5 minutes, no more. Then at night, I repeated the same process, but this time, just before going to bed. That twice-daily application was key. When a day was very bad, I also used it in the afternoon, a third time, but only if I really needed it. Besides topical use, I began to use it internally, but only after getting well informed. A friend recommended adding 1 or 2 drops of the oil to a hot infusion, like chamomile or ginger. Other times I mixed it with a teaspoon of honey in the morning. It's essential to ensure the oil is food grade, not only for external use. If you have doubts, always consult a professional before ingesting any essential oil. One of the most common mistakes I see is people try it for 1 or 2 days, don't notice big changes, and give up. But that's not how it works. This oil needs at least 2 or 3 weeks of consistent use to start being noticeable. The relief is cumulative, and the effects add up with each application. Another mistake, storing it improperly. These oils should be kept in dark bottles, away from direct light and heat. If you leave them in the sun, or next to the oven in the kitchen, they lose potency. I keep mine in a bathroom drawer, in a cool, dry place. It's also important not to overdo it. More drops don't mean more effect. The body absorbs a limited amount. Saturating the skin or body can even irritate you depending on your sensitivity. It's always better to start with little and observe. My advice from experience is simple. Make using the oil a daily ritual, not an occasional treatment, like brushing your teeth or drinking water. Discipline makes the difference. For me, pain began to decrease around the 2nd week, and by the 1st month, I was walking more freely. Not running, of course, but I stopped living worried about every step. In the end, natural works, but it demands something we've forgotten in this world of instant solutions: patience. And when you apply it with faith, commitment, and care, I assure you the results come, as they did for me. Over time, after sharing my experience with this oil, I started receiving messages, letters, and even calls from other older people who had decided to try it. Some with enthusiasm, others skeptical, but all with one thing in common: they were tired of pain and wanted to regain some of their life. One of the first to write me was Mr. Alfred, a 76-year-old man living in a small town in the south. He told me he had been walking with a cane for over 5 years because of advanced osteoarthritis in his knees. He had tried everything prescribed, even expensive therapies promising results. Nothing worked. Until one day, his granddaughter showed him my video testimony. Mr. Alfred began applying the oil twice a day, every day, without fail. He didn't mix it with pills, made no drastic changes. He just was consistent. After 20 days, he noticed the morning pain no longer woke him up. 1 month later, he didn't use the cane inside his house. After 3 months, he was back to going to the park. Today, he says the only thing that reminds him he has osteoarthritis is when he forgets to use the oil for several days. Then there's Clara, a 72-year-old retired teacher who wrote me from Lima. She had practiced yoga since she was 50, but had to stop because of pain in her wrists and hips. She confessed that what hurt her most was not the body, but the loss of her routine, that moment when she felt strong and in control. Clara was more skeptical. She wrote to ask if it really worked, or if it was just another empty promise for older people. I told her what I always say. It's not miraculous, but if you use it well, and with faith, it can help you. 2 months later, she sent me a photo of herself doing a basic yoga pose, smiling widely. She thanked me for giving her back not only mobility, but also her spirit. And I can't forget Ernesto, an 80-year-old widower who had stayed home for years fearing falls. He lived with a constant fear of losing balance. After starting to use the oil, he not only noticed less stiffness in his legs, but also began to take short walks around the block. He wrote me, "I don't walk like before, but I no longer walk with fear. That means a lot to me." What unites all these people is not that they found a magical cure. It's not that they used the oil one day and the next were dancing. What they have in common is they didn't give up, were patient and consistent. And the body, when treated with respect and care, responds. This oil is not a miraculous solution. It won't erase years of wear in a week. But it is a powerful, real, and accessible tool that has improved the quality of life for many people like you and me. If you decide to try it, do so with patience. Give your body the oil every day, like watering a plant. Don't expect explosive results, but subtle signs that something good is happening inside you. Because when you start walking without fear, sleeping without pain, moving without effort, it's not just the body that improves. It's the whole life that begins to bloom again. When I started noticing changes in my body thanks to the oil, I felt a mix of surprise, relief, and anger. Yes, anger. Because for years I had gone from consultation to consultation, talking with doctors, therapists, and specialists. They all offered me the same: more pills, more ointments, colder diagnoses. Not one mentioned that something so simple and natural as this oil existed. Did they ignore it? Or did they just not want to talk about it? Over time, I understood something that was hard to accept. The traditional medical system is not designed to cure you naturally, but to keep you inside the cycle of constant treatment. Not all doctors have bad intentions. Most, in fact, want to help you. But the way they were trained, the books they studied, and the companies that finance many clinical studies are deeply linked to the pharmaceutical industry. When a doctor studies medicine, they spend years learning about medications, diseases, and how to treat symptoms. But very few formal programs teach about medicinal plants, essential oils, or alternative therapies. It's simply not part of the traditional approach. And if something isn't part of your training, it's very unlikely you will recommend it, even if it works. There is also another problem almost nobody talks about: conflicts of interest. It's no secret that many clinics, pharmacies, and labs work together. When a doctor prescribes certain products, many times it's because they are part of an approved protocol or because there are agreements between institutions. No one tells you this openly, but you see it. The same brands, the same solutions, the same promises of immediate relief, and no real cure. That said, I want to make something clear. Not all doctors hide it out of malice. Some simply don't know. They weren't taught. They didn't research. They didn't try. Or maybe, like many, they don't believe it until they see it with their own eyes. That's why you and I have to do something different. We have to investigate, ask, listen to other voices, not accept any diagnosis without thinking, because no one knows your body better than you. And if something is working, if something is helping without harming you, that is worth more than 1,000 prescribed formulas. Being proactive with your health doesn't mean rejecting doctors, but complementing their vision with your experience, intuition, and commitment to wellness. Today, I share what I learned, not so you stop going to the doctor, but so you arrive at the appointment knowing there are more paths, that there are real, simple, natural alternatives, that pain doesn't have to be a silent sentence, that at this stage of life, you can heal if you know where to look. Tarek, if you have made it this far, thank you. Really, thank you. Because what I have told you is not just a personal story. It is a testimony of something I needed to share, not out of obligation, but out of conscience. Because keeping quiet about something that can relieve others' pain would be an act of selfishness. And at this stage of life, one is no longer here to keep the good things to oneself. I am not a doctor. I don't have a degree hanging on the wall nor signed prescriptions. But I have something not everyone has: experience. I have tried things that worked and many that didn't. I have made mistakes, resigned myself, doubted. But I have also learned. And when I discovered this natural oil and saw how it changed my day to day, I knew I couldn't keep it to myself. This oil didn't cure me like magic. It didn't take 20 years off me. But it gave me back freedom. It gave me mobility, relief, and that long-forgotten feeling that the body can still respond when cared for with respect. We live in a world that insists on giving us quick fixes, pills for everything, packaged answers. But the human body doesn't work that way. The body doesn't need more chemicals. It needs what nature has always offered: rest, movement, real food, and remedies that don't do more harm than good. Sometimes, all it takes is listening. Listening to the body, listening to others, and also listening to those small signals that tell us there is still hope. Not every day will be perfect. There will be rainy days when the bones hurt more, days when energy is missing, or moments when it seems nothing changes. But I assure you this: once you start treating yourself with care, with intention, something moves. something improves. And that, even if little, changes everything. The body can heal, not always completely, not always quickly, but it can. The body can heal when you give it the right things, when you stop fighting it and start listening to it. Today I told you what helped me, not to convince you, but to give you an option, so that you or someone you love has one more possibility. And if this video helped you, even a little, I ask a favor. Share it. Because maybe someone next to you, a family member, a neighbor, a friend, is suffering in silence, not knowing there is another way. And you, simply by sharing this story, can change their life. Thank you for being here.
Thank you for listening.
And above all, thank you for continuing to seek a life with less pain and more freedom.